Hey, happy Friday, and welcome to episode 88 of Talking to Artists. As you know, normally these are on Thursdays, but we really wanted to talk to Sandy Middleton. She is an awesome photographer and acoustic artist, but also she's one of the artists who's participating in our Pirate Squared show. So as you can see, I'm here at the studio starting to hang things up. So anyway, we will see here. Sandy is right here. I'm going to just jump right in and in. Okay. Hopefully you've been invited. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. Can you hear and see me okay?
I can, totally well, yeah. And I just realized
Great.
I left all of my notes in my studio. But as you can see, I'm here hanging up the Pirate Squared show.
Looks beautiful.
Yeah, it's some awesome art. I'm so excited. Looking forward to seeing your stuff tomorrow, too.
Nice.
Yeah. So where are you doing this interview from? Are you in your studio?
I'm in a little teeny tiny office in my house.
Oh, lovely.
I think it was supposed to be a walk-in closet that I turned into my office.
It's funny. I think a lot of people over COVID did that same thing.
Yeah.
Like my sister, so she got a call from someone and said, I want 3 of your paintings. I'm going to put them in the closet. And she's like, what? And that was her Zoom call, closet.
Right. I've had this for some time. It was a very unused space, so it's nice because I'm sort of tucked away quietly. That's good.
Yeah. Well, that sounds awesome.
I've taken over the entire house. Let's not lie. Like every room for an artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I totally get that. Yeah, I know. It's so funny because we have a cleaning lady, and my husband's always like, "How can she clean? She can't even get access to half the stuff." And I'm like, "Well, she just has to paint around or clean around it."
Exactly.
Especially this time of the year, I find that he's kind of very, very understanding, but he's like, "I just want a little space, so when I have my breakfast, I've got a place on the table."
I know. Our husbands, if they all got together, I can only imagine.
Oh, yeah, probably a good thing they don't. So maybe you can share a little bit about your journey. I understand you worked as a professional photographer for a while, and now you're obviously a fine art photographer and doing caustic work and teaching. But I always love to hear, like, do you have a degree in fine arts? Did you grow up doing a lot of art? What was your kind of journey?
Right. I think the first time that I got quite heavily into art was in my grade 11, 12 year in high school. They actually allowed us to do a cohort that was based on art and design, drama, health. And so I thought I would give it a try. And we did everything from learning to silkscreen to use an offset press to photography. And we tried all these things for 2 years.
Wow.
I know.
It was an awesome high school program.
It was wonderful. So that was sort of, I can't even remember what else I took, but that was definitely, I had always had a camera and I always took pictures when I was young, but this definitely sent me in a direction and made me know that I wanted to study further. So I think the photography was the part that interested me the most. We had a dark room. I was on the annual committee, that sort of thing. So a lot of early opportunity to take pictures. And I somehow fell in love with the work of Richard Avedon, who was a fashion photographer.
Love his work, yeah.
So I was just sure that I was going to be a fashion photographer. I enjoyed fashion magazines, and that's what I thought I wanted to do. So I was growing up in Victoria, BC, and I went to Whistler for a few years, like to sow my oats, like we all do, before deciding what our path will be. And I knew that if I stayed there, that I would not do anything with my life besides be a ski bum. So
Which has its merits.
Exactly. Some of my friends are still doing that and enjoying it. I applied to Ryerson, and I came across the country. I didn't get in, I don't think, right away. I came across the country by myself and moved to Toronto on my own. And it was a big, scary thing to do. And I decided to take night courses to improve my chances of getting into Ryerson. And after another year, I was admitted on a wait list and got in and was in the still photography department at Ryerson. So it was a polytechnical institute, so it was very focused on the technical side of photography. So we really knew our camera, we knew our darkroom, we knew all that sort of thing. They didn't ever teach us the business of it or really the art side of it.
Well, it's interesting. Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt for a second because I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and my major actually was photography.
Oh, okay.
And but as you're talking, I realized, one of the reasons that it became so challenging out of school is that we actually didn't learn that much about the technical aspects of photography. It was all about the creative piece of it and the exploratory part, especially in the dark room, and especially with color in the dark room, which once you graduate and you don't have all those those kind of
Sure.
services, it becomes really difficult to kind of continue. And then I just recently bought a proper camera to document my work, and I'm like, I'm so intimidated. I don't even know how to turn the thing on.
I know people do rely on that auto mode, which will do a lot for you. But yeah, it's good to really understand what an f-stop and a shutter speed
Yeah.
is and all of those things. But for
So you
sure.
had the technical piece of it, but it didn't necessarily, weren't necessarily taught the creative part of it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, we did all sorts of wonderful creative things, but I didn't really know about selling your work as art. It was more go be a professional photographer.
Mm-hmm.
In that point, I decided I had zero interest in fashion whatsoever, and I did not only did I not like fashion, I didn't really even like photographing people. So I decided that I would just do still life. So I actually did a lot of that type of work for a long time, and hoped that maybe I could have a career. And that's when I did my first Toronto Outdoor Art exhibition. So this was 2004, five. I actually made my tent out of 2x4s. Like, I mean, you can't even believe if you saw a picture that we were allowed. We probably weren't allowed.
Well, those were in the olden days. I think they were a little bit less, a little
Exactly.
less strict
Don't
then.
say olden days.
You're right. I shouldn't.
But I have a picture of this thing, and then at one point it did tide blow over, and all these artisans came out like we were raising a barn and tied ropes onto it and hammered them into the cracks and
Oh wow.
restood my anyway, crazy days. But so I was doing this for a long time, and then I just kind of went right into just running a photo studio. Yeah, for quite a few years.
And so at Photo Studio, so this was your own business. So you did obviously have to learn the business of art.
That's right.
And then at that point, were you doing portraits or were selling more your commercial work or?
I would do anything I was paid to do, quite honest, because as a young, hungry photographer, it was hard to find enough work. I had a beautiful live work studio at Bathurst in college, completely illegal. We didn't even have running water in our places, and I did. I did some people's clothing lines and hats. All my neighbors were artists in the building, so I helped all of them. Uh, Lots of things, and then I actually started documenting artwork for a long time. So I had a lot of clients, and I just did paintings and drawings and all sorts of things. So it was more very factual, not a lot of creativity.
And so how did you kind of make that leap then? Like what kind of made you decide, I'm kind of, that was cool, but I'm sort of need something else to feed my soul?
I think I struggled for a long time. I ended up having a variety of other jobs and part-time jobs, and then that led to me being a bookbinder of all things. And
Wow, that's cool.
I created books and I sold them to all sorts of stores. And then I created a line of greeting cards, and I had a greeting card rep, and I sold thousands of cards across Canada with this rep, to chapters, to all sorts, and every one of them was handmade or hand stitched or had photo corners or the crazy things we do. And so
Hmm.
that sustained me for quite a long time, as well as the books. And eventually, there's a lot more in that journey, as with most artists. Um, I ended up in Niagara because I was going to get married, and I decided to relocate. And at that point, I decided that I wanted to go back to being a full-time artist. So over those years, I just slowly built up from kind of more of a craft-based photography work to entirely fine art photography again in 2010.
Hmm. Yeah, your work is beautiful. Yeah, I've always really admired it because I know we've done a
Thank
lot of
you.
the same shows and stuff together. So,
Exactly.
what did you find? Like, and that's a big kind of leap too. Like you were saying that obviously the schools don't really teach the business part of it. So, was that something that you just kind of had to figure out on the fly, or?
I would say so. In part of this whole journey, when I had part-time work that eventually became full-time, I worked at Roy Thompson Hall. And I was there for 10 years. And I moved up from just a part time bartender job to eventually being assistant catering manager. So I helped run, like many artists, restaurants are a great side gig to keep the bills paid. And so that just led into that
Mhm.
sort of work, catering and so on. And so in that time, I had to serve, a lot of big, high-end clientele, and we had to do all of the forecasting and all the invoicing and all of that sort of thing. So I think I really got my business acumen from working in another job. So when I went out on my
Yeah.
own, I had learned a lot of those skills, and people would remark on, "You're such a good business person. I don't understand how you can also be an artist." And I think this is, having those two different jobs really helped round out my skill set.
It's amazing too how much stuff in that kind of environment that you absorb that you're not even really aware of until you need it, and all of a sudden you're
Yeah,
like, oh, I kind of do know how to do that, even though I haven't been formally trained. And
exactly.
maybe
Yeah,
it's the artist inclination of the way the brain works too, where you're always looking for other things and making connections and stuff that kind of helps within those environments.
for sure. And I think as artists, we just have to find ways to survive. So we use all of these things as not only ways to improve our business, but also to focus our creativity into what matters to us and what interests us, because it's all, fed from our experiences. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it's a stepping stone too, because I mean, I'm assuming too that obviously if you're not running your formal art studio, but you're still applying all those same very, very critical skills that you need to be as an entrepreneur, fine
Mm-hmm.
artist too,
For sure.
keeping on top of all the admin stuff, which, is never fun, but
Well,
has to be done.
I think we've all seen this wheel, of how much time creating an artist does, how much social media, how much bookkeeping, how much, and all the hats we wear. And, making art is probably 25% of the time because of all the things that have to happen around
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
I know, and I feel like right now making art is about 10%, and my social media is about 50%, which, after
Yeah.
this Pirate Squared show, I'm sure no one will hear from me for another month.
Yeah. It's nice to be able to hire someone if you can, that's for sure.
Well, and I was kind of at that point of thinking about it just before COVID, because there's a lot of even stuff, even studio stuff that would be kind of nice to have somebody else have to do. And then, of course, COVID kind of threw everything into, screwed up everything really in terms of those plans. So I
Yeah.
feel like now you're kind of starting to get back.
Yeah.
And I'm going through the exercise right now of actually doing a spreadsheet of what can I actually
Hand off.
delegate out, and
Yeah.
what kind of skills would I need for that, and
Yeah.
what can I not, right?
For sure. I mean, I have I'm not a full-time artist right now, and I actually help coach small businesses here in St. Catharines. I work for an organization called Start Me Up Niagara, and we help people that are really marginalized, that have difficulty finding work. Many of them are disabled, start small businesses of all kinds. So because of all the years that I have run my own business, I have all these skills to try to help them with. And one of the biggest things I say is if you're not an expert at something and you can pay someone to do your books or do your social media or any of those
Mm-hmm.
things, it's worth it, because when you think about what your time is worth as an artist, lost doing jobs that you're not good at, they take you 10 times longer to do. So they use up
Yeah.
more of your time, right?
And I think it's a bit of a scarcity mindset a lot of artists have because of the fact they've gone through, having to really cobble together enough money to pay for rent and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think it's one of those things where it takes you so long and it takes so much time, and somehow you think because you're doing it that it's free, but it's not, because it's an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity cost in terms of missing out on having the time in the studio where you can pay more
Absolutely.
and sell more.
Yeah. One thing, I know how to do websites. I do them for clients, but I would never do my own, really. Like if I was to build a full website, I just know that the time
Yeah.
that would take would not be worth my time. So I'd hire
Yeah.
a specialist
Me
to do
too.
that.
We used to manage, write and everything for websites for clients, and now I'm like, nope, Fine Art Studio Online, good, upload everything. I don't have
Yeah.
to think about it.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry, and it always works because it's one thing I just don't want to have to worry about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I hear you are also doing the artist project this year.
Yes.
So I will see you there. That's
Yes.
exciting.
I think the last time I did it was 2014 or 2015. And I decided to take a break, which ended up being a few years. And then even when I thought about going back, COVID kind of had an effect on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful show. It's a wonderful show. It's always a risky show because it's very expensive to be there. So you have to, hope that it's going to be your customer walking in the door. But there's no better way to get in front of that many people that are really interested in art for 3 solid days. So I'm looking forward to trying.
That's kind of how I think. And I think it is, you're right, it's a bit nerve wracking too, because it's been so long since we've done these art fairs, and yeah, I'm kind of just trying to get everything together and produce everything. And at the end of the day, it's just like, it's really about reconnecting with all of those art lovers and meeting new people. And that's almost, I think, more important than the actual sales that happen at the show, which of course we all hope we sell at the show. But,
Right.
I think that actually feeds you for the future. And I don't know about you, but I certainly found that all those relationships I built over the last number of years really helped me a lot through COVID.
For sure. And I would say when I did the show, even I always sold and I always did fine. And but there'd be periods of time where you wouldn't. But there was always people walking in my booth interacting with me, asking me lots of questions. I never stood around for long without somebody coming in to talk to me. And it truly feeds your soul. Like at the end of the
Yeah.
day, I might say to Mark, I only made one small sale, but I met like 10 amazing people and had these great connections with them. And sometimes it takes people 2, 3 years to make a decision to buy something. That's happened to
Hmm.
me on more than one occasion. So every
Oh, yeah.
conversation is, a prospective buyer, but also somebody who's just an appreciator of what you do.
And I think it's an ability to have an authentic connection.
Hmm.
I think that's why people go to art fairs, is to be able to meet the artists and talk to them and get a feeling for the artists, and you get that kind of connection, which I
Yeah.
totally agree. Like,
Yeah.
I've often said to people, because people say, "Oh, well, how was your show?" I'm like, "I'll let you know in a year," because
Yeah.
you don't know where those contacts are going to come from, and you don't know. It's like it's a lot in 3 days for people to make a big purchase, and so sometimes they do have to think about it for a bit.
Yeah, for sure. And this is going to be really different for me because I'm not going in with any of the work I've ever made before, which is one of the reasons I decided to try it again, because I had been working on this new body of work. It's very, very different than anything I've ever done before. And I really do
Hmm.
need to get some public reaction to it. I have been creating in a vacuum here during COVID with no shows, and it's important for me to see what the feedback is and see if there's
Yeah.
interest in what I'm doing.
I'm kind of doing the same thing. Well, and this is the same work that you're doing your Pirate Squared of, right? Like this the
Correct.
multimedia three-dimensional. So tell me about that. Like, what was the inspiration behind those pieces? I'm really looking forward to seeing them in real life.
They are, I call it paper sculpture because I don't really know encaustic paper sculpture. Everything I always do is based in photography, so either found photography or my own. In this case, these are all pictures that I've taken. I print them out really large on like a kozo or mulberry Japanese paper. And then I painstakingly cut them down into tiny little pieces and then reassemble them to be more of an abstract piece of art.
Hmm.
I wax every single piece of paper as well, so they're beautifully archival. And the bases are each piece is melted into the background wax to secure it. I could have glued them. I tried few different things, but I really like the permanence of the wax. For
Plus, that's
people,
kind of your thing, right? I mean,
yeah.
wax and encaustic has always been a part of who you are and your mark making. In terms, it makes sense to continue that.
Absolutely. And it's a really addictive process for me. Like, I absolutely love working with wax. I also found for so many years, photography is quite instant now that we don't have film. I can walk out the door, take a picture in 2 minutes, come back to my camera or download it, do something to it, manipulate it, have it printed out, and it could be a frame in 15 minutes. Like, that's sort of unheard of, right? And you can do that
Yeah.
now. So when I did straight photography, it shows. It certainly was a whole lot less work for me. But everyone thinks they're a photographer, so there's a lot more difficulty for people to understand the fact that photography is fine art.
Hmm.
So now the work I'm making is excruciatingly slow. It just takes days to make a piece. So my booth is not going to be chock full of pieces, but I think you
It'll be
can also.
serene.
It's going to be serene. It's going to be a very minimal aesthetic, but that's okay. Um, how did it come about? I originally started working with. This is a project I did many, many years ago. I took old film strips and I cut them in pieces. And I had done some collage pieces with just old discarded film strips. And I'd never really forgotten about that piece, and it was really interesting, and it was one of a kind, and I gave it to someone, I don't even remember who, and I always thought, that's an interesting idea, I should revisit that in some way. Um,
Hmm.
and I've been doing a lot of work with found photography as well. So I find old vintage photo albums, and you'll see on my website quite a bit of work with that. So I was even considering working with those. How would I dissect those? Because I have done that where I've torn photographs and sewn them back together. So I kind of played with that idea as well. And then in the end, I decided it would be better to reassemble my own photographs. And then I worked from just a thick photo paper to different types of papers to see what would work. Some of them I actually glued them all down. So it was a real progress to get to this point. A lot of
Hmm.
trial and error, and then eventually I made one, and I was like, "Oh, this is it. I think this is what I want to work on, and I want to try to stick to this idea for a while.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm also launching a new, I don't know if it's a collection yet, I haven't really figured that out yet, but new pieces that are much more linear, but they've got gold foil, which to me I've been kind of curious about playing with foil and incorporating it in a fine art way that doesn't look a little bit kitschy. Like I think you always have to be careful with that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I finally, after doing quite a few of them, figured out the best process and the best way to make sure the foil doesn't go everywhere I don't want it to go, or, you know,
Right.
not fall off the board. So I
Right.
think that now I've got it. But that's kind of part of an interesting creative process that's more on the technical end versus the, I don't want to say the creative end, but, you know, like normally I would be painting and that's the part that I do. And so it's kind of interesting for me to kind of explore the technical pieces of it a bit more.
For sure. And I say I can't draw a straight line. Like I could not paint. But encaustic allows you a lot of freedom, and you can repair it and you can scrape back and start again. Melting these pieces off when they don't work is quite a thing. So, you know, I've
I
had
imagine.
I'm trying to like
And not set fire to them? Hey, did you have
honestly,
problems setting fire to stuff?
I actually did light fire to one of them just to see what it would be like. You'll see it. It's coming to you.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, I just burnt all the edges to see what it would be like. Yeah, it really is an experiment. And then, you know, you can finish it and look at it and go, this is really cool. I'm really enjoying this. And then you try not to do that thing that artists do going, is this sellable? Will anybody want to buy this? I just decided I have to just follow this path. I'm just going to make a bunch of pieces. I have a tendency to flip to different ideas very quickly without fully developing something. And so that's my commitment for 2022, is to fully immerse myself in this idea, to create a considerable body of work with it so that I really can see all the possibilities with it.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea too, because I think it does take time for your collectors and art lovers to kind of wrap their head around new stuff you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Especially because they haven't seen you for 2 years because of COVID, and possibly longer if you haven't done shows. And so I think that it's a smart idea to kind of at least give them the time and space to also be able to kind of look at the work. Because I always find there's usually about a year lag when they launch something or whatever, and then it's kind of, I think, oh, it's obviously not working, nobody loves it, and all of a sudden, as soon as I say those words, it starts to generate.
Yeah, that happens to me, definitely. When I first did the artist project, all my work was on metal, and people hadn't really seen that before, and so people were very fascinated with the process, and almost more the process than the imagery, and so you have to really decide whether that's the right note that you want to go on. And then just so many people wanting to know how you do it, how you do it, how you do it. After a while, that, you know, it becomes a bit exhausting.
I know. I get that with the resin too. It's like, okay, I've said that same phrase about 400,000 times now.
Exactly. And just YouTube is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm expecting a lot of those questions as well of the process with this, and so will be interesting to see, you know, how much conversation comes around that. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure there'll be lots. And I do think that, although I have to sort of remind myself too, is that people are asking those questions, I think, because obviously they're interested. And I do think that sometimes asking a process question is a nice, easy question for people because they don't want to offend you in terms of talking about the art specifically. So it's a kind of a good segue into conversations, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can always tell the photographers in 2 minutes, the minute they walk into my booth, and they'll ask you what camera you shot with, or what film you use.
That always just drive Lori Ryerson crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
and
do they ask you what kind of paintbrush you use?
Exactly. And I'll list all, you know, will I have a 4x5 camera and a 2 1/4 band, a Hasselblad, and you know, they're like, oh, you actually know how to take pictures. I'm like, yes, I've been doing this for 30 years. So yes, I'm a true photographer.
I guess that's a challenge, isn't it? Like to sort of differentiate, and it's not in the same extent, but I think with abstract painting, it's a bit like that too, where kind of people sort of assume that if you don't really know how to paint, that's where you start. You do abstract, you know, because it's just easier, which I don't really think it is, but
100%.
I think it's a challenge sometimes. I think to kind of separate, you know, that there's been a lot of time and energy and expertise that's gone into getting to this point, like with photography as well. Yeah, you haven't just picked up an iPhone and shot these pictures, you know, 2 days ago. It's a long process.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I do, you know, shoot with my iPhone just for Instagram on my Sandy Middleton photographic art page. And when I get private messages to buy pieces, it's almost always the iPhone pictures, which is really interesting. And they want them big, and I can't make them big. So I hesitate sometimes to put up that type of image because they resonate with people for one reason or another. And I'm like, I wish I could do something for you, but I can't make this big enough. It would just, maybe 10 by 10 inches would be the largest. I could print it without it completely degrading, right?
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah, that's not very big.
No.
I would have thought you could have at least done like 2 feet by 2 feet, but I guess the resolution just isn't there.
Yeah, there's 72 DPI.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry?
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so what's next for you then? Obviously, the artist project, working your butt off to get ready for that.
Yeah, it's quite a challenge. I've really had to set up a schedule for myself because I do work 30 hours a week at my job. So I'm only producing evenings and weekends, and you're tired at the end of the day, right? And your creativity isn't necessarily, just peaking at that point. So trying to really focus on the enjoyment of it. I find once I get in the studio and just start working, then I'm really happy that I'm there. It's sometimes hard to make that happen.
I get that, yeah.
But once I'm out there, it's usually very good. I told my husband he's not going to, get a home cooked meal for the next 2 months.
I would recommend HelloFresh. Just want to let you know, it's saved my butt many times.
Yes, absolutely. He's perfectly able to cook a meal. So yeah, I'll just be entirely focusing on the artist project. And of course, I've applied for a handful of summer shows, so we'll see, what I get accepted into. And if I'm really lucky and I sell out at the artist project, then I'll be in a real panic as to what to sell for, June and July. But let's hope that I have that problem.
That's a bridge you can cross when you get to it,
Exactly.
right? I always figure that too. I know, because that's like the intent is always to have, this is the stuff, and then you've got backup for all those pieces to replace on the wall, and then the reality hits where you're like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I just can't paint that fast. You can't produce that fast.
And, the business side of it is you do have to look at the value of the amount of pieces of art that are in your booth. And is that enough, practically to sustain you? Will that cover the cost? Will you make money beyond that? As a photographer, my prices were never as high as painting. So I could sell a 30 by 30 inch photograph for $700 to maybe $1,000. Whereas a painter might charge $2,000 or $3,000 for that same piece of work. So you had to hustle a lot harder to sell a lot more in order to, pay for your booth. I don't think the public really understands some of the costs that are associated with this. And this new work has to be more because it just takes me so long to make that I really have to pay myself.
But I think it sounds like, though, you've kind of broken out of the photography mode. You know what I mean? Like it's you don't have to then adhere to those photography prices anymore.
No, I'm truly pricing them as what I think they're worth. I'm paying attention to how long it takes me to create a piece so that it's reasonable. There's lots of ways of looking at pricing, as you know. There's the square foot, square inch price idea that's never really worked for me. But you can look at what's in the marketplace and where you fall and, what you think is reasonable. And then you have to say, what will the market bear, for a small piece of art or a large piece of art. And, you go from there. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Well, hopefully we both, I was going to say sell out, but actually that's stressful. So sell lots. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, as you say, we'll worry about that when we get to it. But yeah, I'm really I'm excited, but nervous at because it was a sort of short time since we'd been accepted to the time of the show. It feels like a less lead time than before, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, I was sort of already in because I was grandfathered because I put my deposit down like 2 years ago. But my problem really is I have 2 other art fairs where the dates moved. Well, Artist Project also moved. So I have 3 art fairs in 4 weeks.
Right.
So
wonderful.
We'll see.
Right.
It's going to be very serene, very minimalist booths.
Do you want me to hold up a piece?
Sure, yeah.
So maybe people will understand. This is one I've done for your show. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this.
Ooh.
So you can see it's very 3-dimensional. I like to be able to say that it's like a musical instrument.
Oh, you can,
because they're waxed, they're well protected. Now, I'm not going to want lots of customers touching them, but it is possible. But I just wanted to be able to see the texture that was involved in that.
Well, I'm looking forward to putting that on the wall.
Yes. So I have been working primarily with cloud images, and some of that is recognizable. So there is sort of a consistency in the body of work. I say that the work really came out of isolation because during COVID, for the first year, I'd had a knee replacement, and I got it done 3 days before COVID hit and the world shut down.
Geez.
And I was very fortunate. So while I was home recovering, everybody else was locked away at the same time. So it was a lot of time of aloneness and reflection. And, you know, I did a lot of thinking about making art in that year, but I didn't make a single thing. And I don't think I've ever had a year where I didn't make a single thing.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah, there was just nothing in me between the recovery and just what was going on with COVID. And so it was in January, I think, that I just started remembering things, ideas in the past that I had thought about doing but had never made the time, and said, okay, you really have to start getting working. And that's when I just went in the studio and started playing with the photographs and ripping things up and sewing things and whatever. And from there, I made, you know, a handful of pieces and felt immediately like I knew that was the path. But it completely came out of giving myself time and space to think about what it was that I wanted for myself as an artist, as opposed to being reactionary, or I have to be ready for this show, or this is what I think is going to sell really well. It was not about any of those things. It was about solitude, my state of mind, about feeling very alone. I kind of alluded to the pieces as like, you know, everything's sort of fallen to pieces, and now I'm slowly putting them all back together. They might not be
I love that.
not quite arranged the way that we think they should be arranged, but you know,
Well, none of us are the same as we were before COVID. So I think
exactly.
that actually is a really beautiful analogy.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm sort of restoring order by putting everything back in its place. So I would say that's sort of where the whole body of work came out of. And I think it's almost nicer to have work come out of a feeling than a doing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I totally agree, because I mean, I try and only paint when I'm feeling joyful, which has been a challenge sometimes. But it has been actually good for my mental practice, I think, to try and, you know, consciously put myself into a joyful state of mind, because that's not always an easy thing to do.
Absolutely.
But it's probably one of the things that's kind of helped me for sure get through.
And I use this with clients all the time. We know this line, you know, perfect is the enemy of good. And I always felt like every piece I made had to be sellable. Every piece. If it isn't sellable, what's it good for? And I really let go of that with this. There was a lot of pieces that are just scrapped to the floor, and I was okay with it, you know. So if I was going, well, how can I fix that and make it? It was like, oh, well, that one didn't work out. Let's try that again.
Sometimes it's not fixable. And I think sometimes too, as artists, I think sometimes, I don't know, for me, I sometimes get so fixated in this is what my intent was. And if it didn't turn out the way I intended, somehow it's a failure. As opposed to, no, it's just different from what I was thinking about. And I've sort of learned now, first of all, to not judge it that night. Like I'll come in the next morning and also just get other people's feedback. Because often those ones that I'm not sure of are ones that for some reason just really resonate with other people. So I'm also trying to be okay with, you know, it's not my favorite because it didn't turn out the way I was thinking, but someone else obviously loves it enough that they want to live with it forever, and that's got to be enough. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times the very first piece I've sold in any show is the piece that I'm the least attached to. Just all the time.
Maybe because you're emotionally ready to let that one go.
I'm just like, well, I should bring it. It's going to fill the space. There's nothing really wrong with it. I just don't feel excited about it, or is it okay? And then someone's like, that one. And I'm just like, oh, okay, well, I know nothing.
Well, that's why I think it's always interesting, because, you know, they always say to these art fairs and art shows, like, bring your best work. Like, well, obviously that kind of makes sense, but sometimes actually determining what your best work is not always so easy. Because I find, too, there's certain colors I love, but I also know that they're very hard sell. So I'll still do some of them because I love to do them, but, you know, I'm not going to put all of them in my booth because it's just
absolutely.
too much.
Yeah, you have to serve yourself for sure, but you know, we do have to survive here, so you have to straddle that line for sure. Yeah. Anyway, it's been nice to feel motivated and excited about a project. So now deadlines are very difficult, but they're the thing that motivate me the most to stay focused. There's no more miracle than I can pull out than when I have a deadline. So.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah. I know. I just did my spreadsheet too, of like all the things I need to produce and what stage they're at and what I have to do next, just so that you're also working efficiently, because
absolutely,
you sort of have to do that too sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I look forward to it.
Well, thank you. It's been awesome connecting with you. So I always like to end my interviews with if money, time, and everything was no option, what would your big hairy ass goal be?
Oh boy. Well, I certainly not have a job, and I would work full time as being an artist. So
That's a good goal.
that's an easy one. I just built a beautiful studio in my backyard, so normally I'd say have a nice studio, but I got that as well. Yeah, I think just
Good.
having more time to work would be wonderful.
Hmm.
And I would love to be able to break into the American market and do shows, but that is just a very cost prohibitive thing to do.
It's hard, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And you have to really research, I think, that your work having a good fit with the audience.
yeah, for sure. But yeah, mostly in
Okay.
terms of what I'm doing, I'm pretty happy right now.
Well,
Yeah,
that's pretty awesome. I mean, it's great to be at a stage where you're kind of like, yeah, I could have other hairy ass goals, but really right now I'm in a good place and I can see a path of what I'm going to do next. And
for
yeah,
sure.
it's all feeling good. Yeah.
For sure. Yep.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And I'm really looking forward to seeing your pie art squared. I'm just going to do a little bit of scoot here so people can kind of see some of the other stuff here. We've got, I think we're going to have probably, I don't know, 150 pieces on the wall.
Wow, nice.
And yeah, probably over 250 online to sell. So that'll be
Nice.
kind of fun. Yeah, and our
Well,
opening is Friday week today. So
mine will, I'm going to send two of the three to you tomorrow. And yeah, I really look forward to the opening.
yeah, it's going to be great.
All right.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you
Kate.
so much, and we'll
I
talk.
wasn't
We'll see
able
you later.
to see who joined us, but hopefully we had some people watching
Yeah,
today.
I know we did for sure, and I'll post this on my site, and then obviously you can if I can have you as a collaborator, I'll do that so that you can kind of actually post on your own as well. And
Wonderful.
eventually it'll be a podcast. It's just that it takes a while to kind of get the audio to the point that it
Nice.
can be a podcast. But there's about 45 episodes that are already on
Wow.
Talking to Artists wherever you get your podcast. So there's lots
Okay.
of kind of cool stuff there.
I'll go have a
So
listen. Thanks, Kate.
cool. All right. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Okay, bye.
Bye.